Sarah Williams clutched her swollen belly as another sharp pain shot through her body. The baby was coming, and she was still 3 miles away from the nearest hospital. Her old car had broken down on the deserted country road just as the evening shadows began to fall across the rolling hills of the English countryside. She had been visiting her sister in the remote village of Millbrook when the labor pains started suddenly. The baby wasn't due for another 2 weeks, but nature had its own plans. Her sister Emma had rushed her toward the car, both women panicking as they realized this wasn't false labor. The contractions were getting stronger and closer together with each passing minute. Now, sitting alone in her stalled vehicle with steam rising from the hood, Sarah felt tears of fear and frustration rolling down her cheeks. Her phone showed no signal bars in this remote area, and the sun was setting fast. The narrow country lane rarely saw traffic, especially this late in the evening. Sarah tried to remember everything from her birthing classes, but panic was making it hard to think clearly. She had practiced breathing exercises dozens of times, but nothing had prepared her for this moment of complete helplessness. Her husband James was away on business in Scotland, and Emma had stayed behind to call for help from the village. The pain was becoming unbearable now, coming in waves that left her gasping for breath. She knew she couldn't stay in the car much longer. With great difficulty, she managed to open the door and step outside, hoping the fresh air might help. The evening breeze carried the scent of wildflowers and distant rain clouds. As she leaned against the car door, another contraction hit her so hard that she nearly collapsed. She gripped the metal frame tightly, her knuckles turning white as she fought through the pain. In the growing darkness, she could hear the distant sound of hoofbeats approaching along the cobblestone path that ran parallel to the road. Sarah's heart began to race with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Who could be riding at this hour? The sound grew closer, and she could make out the silhouette of a horse and rider emerging from the shadows of the ancient oak trees that lined the path. The rider appeared to be wearing some kind of uniform, and as they drew closer, Sarah could see the distinctive red tunic and tall black hat of a royal guard. But something seemed different about this particular guard. The rider moved with unusual care, guiding the magnificent black stallion with gentle precision rather than the rigid military bearing she might have expected. The horse seemed to sense something in the air. Its ears pricked forward and its pace slowing as they approached Sarah's disabled car. The animal's dark eyes reflected an intelligence that seemed almost human, and it turned its head toward Sarah as if drawn by some invisible force. Sarah waved frantically, her voice hoarse as she called out into the evening air. Another contraction was building, and she knew she was running out of time. The baby was coming whether she was ready or not, and she desperately needed help from anyone who might be willing to stop. The royal guard pulled gently on the reins, and the black stallion came to a complete halt just a few yards from where Sarah stood. For a moment, neither the rider nor Sarah spoke, as if both were trying to understand the gravity of the situation that was unfolding on this quiet country road. The evening air was filled with tension and anticipation as Sarah realized that her fate, and that of her unborn child, might now rest in the hands of this unexpected stranger and their remarkable horse. The royal guard dismounted swiftly, and Sarah was surprised to see that it was a young woman, perhaps in her late 20s, with kind brown eyes and a determined expression. Her name tag read Officer Catherine Mills, and she moved with the confidence of someone trained to handle emergencies. "Ma'am, I can see you're in distress," Catherine said, her voice calm and reassuring despite the urgency of the situation. "I'm trained in basic medical assistance. When did your labor begin?" Sarah managed to gasp out the details between contractions, explaining how her car had broken down and how isolated they were from any medical help. Catherine quickly assessed the situation, her eyes scanning the darkening road in both directions. "We need to get you to safety immediately," Catherine said. But as she spoke, both women realized the same troubling fact. Catherine's horse was trained for ceremony and patrol, not for carrying 2 people, especially not a woman in active labor. The black stallion, whose name was Midnight according to the small brass plate on his bridle, seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. The magnificent animal stepped closer to Sarah, lowering his head as if offering comfort. His gentle eyes seemed to radiate a warmth that Sarah found strangely calming. Catherine was thinking quickly, her military training kicking in as she evaluated their options. The nearest hospital was too far by foot, especially with Sarah's condition worsening by the minute. They needed a solution, and they needed it fast. Then something remarkable happened. Midnight began to move in a way that neither Catherine nor Sarah had ever seen before. The horse positioned himself carefully beside Sarah, then slowly and deliberately lowered himself to the ground in a controlled manner, folding his powerful legs beneath him. Catherine stared in amazement. In all her years of working with horses, she had never seen one voluntarily lie down in this manner, unless commanded to do so for special training. Midnight was offering himself as a living, breathing ambulance. "I don't believe this," Catherine whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "He's never done anything like this before. It's as if he knows exactly what we need." Sarah, despite her pain, was equally amazed by the horse's behavior. Through her tears, she could see the intelligence and compassion in Midnight's dark eyes. The horse remained perfectly still, his breathing steady and calm, as if he were waiting patiently for her to accept his help. With Catherine's assistance, Sarah carefully positioned herself on Midnight's broad back. The horse's coat was warm and surprisingly comfortable, and she could feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her. Catherine fashioned a makeshift cushion from her guard's cape, ensuring Sarah would be as comfortable as possible for the journey ahead. Once Sarah was secure, Catherine gave Midnight a gentle signal, and the horse slowly rose to his feet with remarkable care and balance. Not once did he make a sudden movement that might have caused Sarah distress or put her in danger. Catherine remounted behind Sarah, one arm securely around the expectant mother's waist while maintaining control of the reins with her other hand. She spoke softly to Midnight, explaining their destination and the urgency of their mission, as if the horse could understand every word. What happened next defied everything Catherine thought she knew about horses. Instead of waiting for her commands, Midnight began to move forward on his own, choosing the smoothest path available and adjusting his pace to ensure the most comfortable ride possible for his precious cargo. The horse seemed to know instinctively when Sarah was experiencing a contraction, slowing his pace and moving even more carefully during those difficult moments. His hooves found the softest ground, avoiding rocks and ruts that might cause jarring movements. As they began their journey through the countryside toward the distant lights of the town, Sarah felt a strange sense of peace despite her circumstances. She was riding through the night on a horse that seemed to possess an almost supernatural understanding of her needs, guided by a royal guard who had appeared at exactly the right moment. As they traveled through the moonlit countryside, Midnight's behavior became even more extraordinary. The horse seemed to sense every change in Sarah's condition, responding to her needs before Catherine could even give commands. When Sarah's breathing became labored during a particularly strong contraction, Midnight would slow to an almost complete stop, his massive body providing a steady, warm platform for her to rest against. Catherine found herself in awe of her own horse. She had worked with Midnight for over 3 years, training him for royal ceremonies and public events, but she had never witnessed anything like this level of intuitive care. The horse was making decisions independently, choosing routes that Catherine wouldn't have thought to take. They passed through a small wooded area where the path was particularly rough, but Midnight somehow found the smoothest route possible, weaving between trees and avoiding every rock and root that might have caused discomfort. His hooves seemed to know exactly where to step, as if he had traveled this path many times before, though Catherine was certain they had never been in this particular area together. Sarah was amazed by how secure she felt on the horse's back. Despite never having ridden before, she found herself moving naturally with Midnight's rhythm. The horse's breathing had synchronized with hers, and she could feel his strength and determination with every step. It was as if the animal understood that he was carrying not just one life, but 2. The contractions were getting stronger and more frequent now, and Sarah knew the baby was coming soon. Catherine checked her watch and realized they were still at least 20 minutes away from the hospital, even at their current pace. She began to worry that they might not make it in time. As if reading her thoughts, Midnight picked up his pace slightly, but not in the way Catherine expected. Instead of simply moving faster, the horse began to take longer, smoother strides that covered more ground, while maintaining the same gentle rhythm. It was a gait that Catherine had never felt before, something between a walk and a canter, but perfectly smooth and controlled. They emerged from the woods and could see the lights of the town in the distance. Sarah was gripping Catherine's arm tightly now, and both women could tell that the birth was imminent. They needed to reach medical help within the next few minutes, or Sarah would be giving birth on horseback in the middle of the countryside. Midnight seemed to understand the urgency. Without any signal from Catherine, the horse began to move faster, but his motion remained incredibly smooth. He was covering ground at an impressive speed while still providing the most comfortable ride possible for Sarah. His hooves barely seemed to touch the ground, and his breathing remained steady and controlled despite the increased pace. As they approached the outskirts of town, Catherine began to call out, hoping to attract attention from anyone who might be able to help. Her voice carried through the quiet night air, and lights began to appear in windows as residents were awakened by the sound of hoofbeats and urgent shouting. A man emerged from one of the houses, and Catherine quickly explained the situation. He immediately ran back inside to call for an ambulance and to gather some supplies that might be helpful. Within minutes, other neighbors had appeared, forming a small crowd of people eager to help. But Sarah's labor was progressing too quickly. Even as the sound of approaching sirens could be heard in the distance, it became clear that the baby wasn't going to wait. Catherine made a quick decision, directing Midnight to a nearby grassy area that would provide a safer place for an emergency delivery. Once again, Midnight demonstrated his remarkable understanding of the situation. He carefully lowered himself to the ground in the same controlled manner he had done earlier, providing a clean, soft surface for Sarah. Several of the townspeople brought blankets and clean towels, creating a makeshift delivery area. Catherine, drawing on her emergency medical training, prepared to assist with the birth while the crowd of helpful neighbors provided light with flashlights and cell phones. The ambulance was getting closer, but it was becoming obvious that this baby had chosen to make his entrance into the world in the most unusual circumstances possible. Midnight remained perfectly still throughout the entire process, his warm body providing comfort and stability for Sarah during the most challenging moments of her labor. The horse's calm presence seemed to have a soothing effect on everyone present, as if his quiet strength was radiating outward to the entire gathering. The moments that followed were filled with intensity and wonder. Sarah's baby decided to make his grand entrance into the world, just as the ambulance pulled up to the scene. The paramedics arrived to find a healthy newborn boy crying lustily in his mother's arms, surrounded by a crowd of smiling townspeople, and watched over by a magnificent black horse who had served as the most unusual delivery room in medical history. Dr. Emily Chen, the lead paramedic, had seen many unusual birth situations in her 15-year career, but nothing quite like this. As she examined both mother and baby, she couldn't help but marvel at how well everything had gone despite the extraordinary circumstances. The baby was perfect, weighing a healthy 7 pounds and showing all the signs of a normal, healthy delivery. "This is remarkable," Dr. Chen told Catherine as they carefully transferred Sarah and her newborn son to the ambulance stretcher. "Everything went so smoothly, and both mother and baby are in excellent condition. I've never seen anything like it." Sarah looked down at her beautiful baby boy, then turned to Catherine with tears of gratitude in her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "You and Midnight saved our lives tonight." Catherine smiled, but her attention was focused on Midnight, who was still lying calmly on the grass, watching the proceedings with his intelligent dark eyes. The horse had remained motionless throughout the entire birth, providing the most stable and comforting environment possible under the circumstances. As the paramedics prepared to transport Sarah and the baby to the hospital for routine checkups, something beautiful happened. Midnight slowly rose to his feet and walked over to the stretcher where Sarah was holding her newborn. The horse gently lowered his great head and seemed to look directly at the tiny baby, as if he were checking to make sure his mission had been completed successfully. The baby, who had been fussing slightly, became completely calm when Midnight approached. His tiny eyes opened wide, and he seemed to stare directly at the horse that had played such a crucial role in bringing him safely into the world. For a moment it appeared as though the newborn and the horse were sharing some kind of silent communication. One of the townspeople, an elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson, who had brought blankets to help with the delivery, wiped tears from her eyes as she watched the scene. "In all my 87 years, I've never seen anything so beautiful," she said to the others standing nearby. That horse knew exactly what needed to be done. Catherine was equally moved by Midnight's behavior. She had always known her horse was special, but tonight he had revealed qualities that went far beyond anything she could have imagined. The bond between them had always been strong, But now she understood that Midnight possessed a level of intelligence and compassion that was truly extraordinary. As Sarah and her baby were loaded into the ambulance, she insisted on speaking to Catherine one more time. "What's his name?" she asked, nodding toward Midnight. "Midnight," Catherine replied. "His official name is Royal Midnight." Sarah smiled through her exhaustion. "Then that's what I'm naming my son," she said. "Michael Royal Thompson." Michael for his grandfather and Royal in honor of the horse that brought him safely into this world. The crowd of townspeople applauded this announcement, and Catherine felt her heart swell with pride and emotion. She had never imagined that her evening patrol would lead to such an incredible experience, or that her horse would prove to be such a hero. As the ambulance prepared to depart, Dr. Chen approached Catherine with a curious expression. "I have to ask," she said, "how did you train your horse to behave like that?" "I've worked with mounted police units before, and I've never seen anything quite like what happened here tonight." Catherine shook her head, still somewhat bewildered by the evening's events. "I didn't train him to do any of that," she admitted. "He just seemed to know what was needed. I've never seen him act like this before." Dr. Chen looked over at Midnight, who was now standing quietly beside Catherine, his head held high and his eyes alert but calm. "Well, whatever the explanation, that horse has remarkable instincts. You should be very proud of him." As the ambulance drove away toward the hospital, carrying Sarah and baby Michael to safety, Catherine stood in the quiet country road surrounded by the townspeople who had helped during the emergency. Everyone was talking excitedly about what they had witnessed, but Catherine found herself looking at Midnight with new eyes, wondering what other hidden depths her remarkable partner might possess. The news of Midnight's heroic actions spread quickly throughout the region. By the next morning, reporters from local newspapers and television stations had gathered at the Royal Guard stables, all eager to learn more about the horse that had helped deliver a baby on a country road. Catherine found herself thrust into an unexpected spotlight as she tried to explain what had happened. She gave interview after interview, but each time she told the story, she found herself more amazed by Midnight's behavior. The horse had acted with a level of intelligence and compassion that seemed almost beyond animal instinct. Captain Robert Hayes, Catherine's commanding officer, was initially skeptical of the reports he was hearing. But as more details emerged and witness accounts confirmed every aspect of the story, he began to realize that something truly extraordinary had occurred. "In 30 years of working with horses," Captain Hayes told a reporter, "I've never heard of anything quite like this. Royal Midnight has always been an exceptional animal, but what happened last night goes beyond anything in my experience." Meanwhile, at the hospital, Sarah and baby Michael were doing wonderfully. The doctors were amazed by how smoothly everything had gone, considering the unusual circumstances of the birth. Sarah couldn't stop talking about Catherine and Midnight, telling every nurse and doctor about the incredible horse that had saved her life. James, Sarah's husband, had rushed back from Scotland as soon as he received the news. When he arrived at the hospital and heard the full story of his son's birth, he was overwhelmed with gratitude and amazement. "I need to meet this horse," he told Sarah. "I need to thank him properly for what he did for you and Michael." Dr. Margaret Foster, the obstetrician who examined Sarah and the baby at the hospital, was fascinated by the medical aspects of the story. The fact that the mother remained so calm and stable during the delivery, despite being on horseback in the middle of a field, is remarkable, she explained to her colleagues. "There's something to be said for the calming effect that this particular animal seemed to have on the entire situation." Word of Midnight's actions eventually reached the highest levels of the Royal Guard command structure. Colonel William Sterling, the overall commander of the Royal Guard, decided that such an extraordinary act of service deserved recognition. 3 days after the birth, a special ceremony was arranged at the Royal Guard headquarters. Sarah and James were invited to attend, bringing baby Michael with them. The entire community that had helped during the emergency was also invited, creating a gathering that celebrated both human kindness and animal heroism. Colonel Sterling presented Midnight with a special commendation, a beautiful medallion that would be permanently attached to his bridle. In recognition of extraordinary service and compassion, the inscription read, "Royal Midnight, Hero." But the most touching moment of the ceremony came when Sarah approached Midnight with baby Michael in her arms. The horse immediately lowered his head, just as he had done on the night of the birth, and gazed at the infant with the same gentle attention he had shown before. Baby Michael, now 3 days old, seemed to recognize his unusual birth companion. He became completely quiet and still, staring at Midnight with wide, curious eyes. The crowd watching fell silent, moved by the obvious connection between the horse and the child. "He remembers," Sarah whispered to Catherine. "I know it sounds impossible, but I think Michael remembers Midnight." Catherine nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She had formed an even deeper bond with Midnight over the past few days, understanding that she was partnered with a truly exceptional animal. The horse had shown qualities of intelligence, empathy, and intuitive understanding that challenged everything she thought she knew about animal behavior. Several veterinarians and animal behavior experts had examined Midnight in the days following the incident, hoping to understand what might have prompted such remarkable behavior. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, an equine behaviorist from the local university, was particularly intrigued. "There are documented cases of animals displaying extraordinary empathy and intelligence in crisis situations," Dr. Mitchell explained to the assembled crowd. "But the level of complex decision-making and adaptive behavior that Midnight demonstrated is truly exceptional. He seemed to understand not just that help was needed, but exactly what kind of help was required." As the ceremony concluded, arrangements were made for Sarah and her family to visit Midnight regularly. The horse had played such a crucial role in Michael's entry into the world that everyone agreed the connection between them should be maintained and celebrated. 6 months later, the bond between Michael and Midnight had grown into something that amazed everyone who witnessed it. Sarah brought her baby to visit the Royal Guard stables every week, and each time, Midnight's reaction was the same gentle recognition and protective attention that had marked their first meeting. Michael, now a chubby, happy 6-month-old, would light up with smiles whenever he saw Midnight. The horse, in turn, would become completely calm and focused whenever the baby was near, as if he understood that he had a special responsibility to this little person, whose life he had helped bring into the world. Catherine had kept detailed notes about Midnight's behavior, both during the rescue and in the months that followed. She shared her observations with researchers who were studying animal intelligence and empathy, contributing to scientific understanding of the remarkable capabilities that some animals possess. The story of Midnight and baby Michael had attracted attention from around the world. Letters and gifts arrived at the Royal Guard stables from people in dozens of countries, all expressing admiration for the horse's heroic actions. Children's book authors wanted to write about Midnight, and documentary filmmakers sought permission to tell his story. But for Catherine, Sarah, and baby Michael, the most important aspect of the story wasn't the fame or attention. It was the ongoing relationship between a special horse and the child whose life he had helped save. Dr. Mitchell, the animal behaviorist, had continued to study Midnight's behavior and had made some fascinating discoveries. "This horse displays what we might call emotional intelligence, May," she explained during a follow-up interview. "He seems able to read and respond to human emotions in ways that go far beyond typical animal training or conditioning." The Royal Guard had received requests from medical centers and emergency response teams wanting to learn more about how animals might be trained to assist in crisis situations. While no one could replicate Midnight's specific abilities, his actions had opened up new conversations about the potential roles that animals might play in emergency services. James had indeed made good on his promise to properly thank Midnight. He visited the stables regularly, bringing carrots and apples for the horse and spending time simply being present as a gesture of ongoing gratitude. He often said that he owed his son's safe arrival to this remarkable animal and the skilled Royal Guard who had partnered with him. On the first anniversary of Michael's birth, a special celebration was held at the same spot where he had been born. The entire community that had helped that night gathered again, along with Sarah's extended family and many of the Royal Guards. Midnight was the guest of honor, wearing his special commendation medallion and seeming to understand the significance of the occasion. 1-year-old Michael was now walking and had developed an even stronger connection with Midnight. He would toddle directly to the horse whenever they met, reaching up to touch the animal's soft muzzle with his tiny hands. Midnight always lowered his head to make contact easier, moving with the same careful precision he had shown on the night of the birth. Catherine had been promoted within the Royal Guard, partly in recognition of her excellent handling of the emergency situation, but she had requested to remain partnered with Midnight, understanding that their bond had been strengthened by their shared experience in ways that would benefit both their service and their personal relationship. As the anniversary celebration continued into the evening, Sarah found herself standing beside Midnight, watching her son play with other children in the grass where he had taken his first breath. The horse stood quietly beside her, his presence as calming and reassuring as it had been on that frightening night a year earlier. "Thank you," she whispered to Midnight, just as she had done many times before. "Thank you for bringing my son safely into the world." The horse turned his great head toward her, his dark eyes reflecting the same intelligence and compassion that had made him such an extraordinary hero. In that moment, Sarah understood that some connections transcend the boundaries between species, creating bonds of gratitude and love that will endure for a lifetime. Michael, Royal Thompson, would grow up knowing that his very first moments in the world had been protected and guided by a remarkable horse whose quiet heroism had made all the difference, and Midnight would continue his service as a royal guard mount, carrying with him the knowledge that sometimes the most important duty an animal can perform is simply to be present when help is needed most.